2022 for the Metro Nashville Public Schools Board of Education. We are now called to order and have established a quorum with 2 missing. Could I have our Hillwood ambassadors, would you mind coming to the podium just to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I put you on the spot.
Go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so very much. We will now be adopting the agenda as listed. I have one amendment, Ms. Tyler.
Yes, I would like to just make a quick statement in memorandum before the awards and recognition.
Okay. Any objections? All right. Any other amendments? Go ahead, Ms. Fuqua Walker.
I'd like to add an action item to the agenda on the mask policy, following Dr. Battle's director's report today.
Okay, so that would be shifting the discussion from after consent agenda to moving the discussion and an actionable item under
After the director's report.
All right, any objections? Seeing none. All right, so that action item has been added under director's report, and we will have a few words from Mrs. Tyler. Go right ahead.
Okay, I hope I can get through this. I just want to recognize and honor the life of Paul Elton Bass, who passed away February 13th. He was an MNPS student himself. He graduated from Pearl High School in 1973, and he was a lifelong teacher in Metro schools. Mr. Bass, or P. Bass, as he was known, was unequivocally called to be a teacher and a coach. When you talk about every student known, P. Bass was the embodiment of that. He impacted the lives of all the students in the schools where he worked, even if you weren't in one of his classes or on the wrestling team. He was someone you could count on. If you asked him to show up, he was going to be there. He attended weddings, class reunions, birthday parties, all sorts of personal events for his students. Because if you ever met Mr. Bass, he claimed you for life. So, personally, I won't be able to talk about it, but he meant a lot to me, and to a lot of other people. So, visitation will be tomorrow, February 23rd, at Terrell Brody Funeral Home between noon and 6. The wake will be Thursday, February 24th from 6 to 7 at Galilee Missionary Baptist Church, with the funeral immediately following. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tyler, and from our MLK alum, we will forever be indebted to Coach Bass. I think many Nashville former students knew and loved him, so thank you for that. We'll move on to awards and recognitions. But you feel free.
All right, thank you, Chair Books, and good evening, board members. It's always just appropriate to recognize the life of one of our longtime educators. And we also, as we do that, we also have some celebrations tonight that we want to celebrate together as we just think about all the great work of our educators, our staff, and definitely our students. So this first recognition, let me start by saying this. Let me start with, to be named a McDonald's All-American is one of the highest honors a high school basketball player can receive. And this year, MNPS has won. Brandon Miller, a senior at Cane Ridge High School. Let's give him a round of applause. All right, Brandon, stay right there. This might take me a while. So Brandon, who has signed to attend and play for the University of Alabama this fall, is a small forward. No, he's not small at all, and is ranked number 13 in the ESPN 100 for the class of 2020. Standing 6 feet 8 inches, he averaged 26.2 points, 7.6 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and 2.3 steals per game last season for the Ravens. This season, Brandon is shattering school records for the most points scored in a game, 42, and the most three-pointers made during a home game, 11. Brandon is MNPS's third McDonald's All-American and our first since 1996. This is truly an elite honor. Michael Jordan, Candace Parker, LeBron James, and the late Kobe Bryant are a few of the incredible talents who have played in the McDonald's All-American game over the past 45 years. Brandon will play in this year's McDonald's All-American game on Tuesday, March 29th at 8:00 p.m. in Chicago. Now, this is not a board meeting night, so tune in to see Brandon in action, and I hope all of you can. Brandon, we are so proud of your achievements and impressed by your work ethic and drive to succeed that you've shown day after day. Thank you for being a great student athlete, an example and role model for your peers. Now, at this time, I'd like to invite you all up to take a quick picture. We have Brandon, his head coach, Marlon Sims, is here, Principal Michelle Sanchez, and Brandon's great parents. If you all can come on up, we'd love to congratulate him again and take a quick photo. Let's give him another round of applause to represent.
The Lord knows who to give height to.
The masked people done hijacked.
I want to go so bad.
Got another one. Look at him. Celebrate that black excellence.
Now, Madam Chair and board members, tonight we're also celebrating a former MNPS athlete who has represented the district well for more than 50 years. Walter Overton, could you please come up to the podium? There he is. Thank you for being here. So just a little background about Walter. Walter was an all-state quarterback at Pearl High School from 1967 to 1969. The Tennessean named him one of Nashville's 50 greatest high school football players in 2018. And he is a member of the MNPS Sports Hall of Fame. When he graduated from Pearl, Walter enrolled at Vanderbilt University, where he was one of the first black student athletes and a key wide receiver and kicker for the Commodores. Walter later served as executive director of the Metro Sports Authority and was a general manager of Nissan Stadium for 15 years before he retired last year. But he remains active in the community, and some of you may have seen him refereeing a high school basketball game here or there, which he continues to do. Walter, we congratulate you on your retirement, but we're glad you're still involved in athletics and setting a great example for our student athletes. And we're proud of the way you continue to represent Metro Nashville Public Schools. Let's give him another round of applause, and if you can join us up front.
Celebrate that black excellence.
Also, board members, this year the academies of Nashville have more than doubled their high-quality Tennessee certified pathways available to students. There are now 11 high schools with 18 programs of study featuring formalized relationships with industry and post-secondary partners, leading students into an accelerated path to their field of study. Metro schools now have more Tennessee certified pathways than any other school district in the state of Tennessee. Though the academies of Nashville are nationally and internationally recognized for model academies, Tennessee Pathway Certification afforded us an opportunity to dive deeper into each academy to evaluate the quality of each pathway within them. Metro Schools has 29 model academies and 6 model academies with distinction. The top certified pathways in the academies align with industry needs in Nashville, health sciences and technology, while also highlighting popular programs in STEM like engineering, audiovisual production, and criminal justice, and new pathways this year in teaching as a profession, automotive maintenance and light repair, technology, and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Nashville is a creative center. We're excited to celebrate newly certified pathways in marketing management and entrepreneurship, which join our certified digital arts and design options, and we look forward to expanding to non-CTE pathways to certify innovative programs like interdisciplinary science and research in the future. These are the newly certified pathways. School leaders who are here representing your respective school academies, when I call your school's name and pathway, please make your way to the front near the podium so we can recognize you. First up, we have Antioch High School, Teaching as a Profession, K-12. Glencliff High School, Environmental and Natural Resource and Management and Technology. Hillsborough High School, Audiovisual Production and Marketing Management. Hunters Lane High School, Marketing Management and Entrepreneurship. Maplewood High School, Automotive Maintenance and Light Repair. John Overton High School, Mechanical, Electrical, and Plumbing Systems and Engineering. Pearl Cone High School, Therapeutic Services. And Whites Creek High School, Criminal Justice and Correction Services. Now, to be certified, schools had to complete a rigorous application for each program featuring student enrollment and outcomes from their data, a narrative and partner documentation in 3 sections: access, equity and high-quality advising, early college and career experiences, and cross-sector partnerships. MNPS was also selected to be one Northern Middle Tennessee district for the site visit pilot for Tennessee Pathway Certification, a live review of partnerships, data, and programming completed by John Overton High School for their STEM, engineering, and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems program. Tennessee Pathways reviewers were moved and excited to hear about the processes and engagement they heard from students, staff, and partners, and they look forward to sharing new possibilities with districts statewide. Tennessee Pathway Certification is one of 4 key pillars of the New Skills Ready opportunity to ensure that students have access to quality and rigorous career pathways with relevant credentials that lead to post-secondary credit and prepare students for advanced education and or entry into high-wage, high-growth careers. Exceeding expectations, 7 schools beyond the 4 New Skill Ready schools opted to participate in Tennessee Pathway Certification. As both the director of schools and a former high school principal, this makes me so happy and proud. We continue to create new and excellent opportunities for our students to learn about and observe the careers that interest them so they can be prepared to enter the workforce after high school or after college. And now for those leaders who are here representing their schools, if you all can come on back up to the podium and join us for a quick picture. Let's give them a round of applause.
My people are here. Yeah, over there. There you go. There you go. Oh.
All right, I have one more group to recognize. 7 of our elementary schools were honored recently for their response to intervention work to reach all students and meet their behavioral needs. The Tennessee Tiered Support Center announced that 4 MNPS schools have been selected as RTI 2B schools of recognition, and 3 schools have been named a model of demonstration at the bronze level. These schools have implemented a positive and proactive behavioral systems framework for all students. This includes identifying common behavioral expectations across campus and teaching, reteaching, reinforcing, and regularly acknowledging students, faculty, and families for exhibiting these expectations. These actions improve their school climate and culture, as well as student engagement and school connectedness. The Tennessee Tier Support Center awarded School of Recognition status to the following schools. And leaders, if you're here, if you're representing your school, please come up to the podium, remain up here because we will take a quick picture. We'd like to celebrate first Charlotte Park Elementary. Glencliff Elementary. Rose Park Steam Magnet Elementary. And Schwab Elementary. Hang up there for me. Model of Demonstration Bronze Level status was awarded to the following schools. If you are here, please come up to the front. Amqui Elementary. Cane Ridge Elementary School. And Harpeth Valley Elementary School. Wow, congratulations to each of these schools, which serve as models and mentors for other schools across not only the district, but the state. I'm proud of everyone who's part of the administration, teaching, and support teams at each school for all the great work you've put into serving our students and earning these honors. And now I'd like to ask each of you to come up front and join us for a picture, and board members, if you're represented and the school's being recognized, please join us.
Take it off. You're Stacey Abrams. You got this. Show the smile.
Wait a minute now. Like, yeah, like we gotta make sure like people are not saying. Yeah, like that's not gonna work. Right, no, not at all.
The way it was monsooning, you should have. I know, right? People are wild. Oh my goodness. You wonder why we did what we did. Hillwood ambassadors.
Yes. That would be me. All right, and finally, an exciting portion of our board meeting tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Bell in just a moment, our Director of the Academies of Nashville and Career and Technical Education. She is here to introduce a few very special students to share a presentation and an update with us. Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. It is one of my greatest joys always to invite our incredible ambassadors to come up and share a little bit with you all about their academy experience. And so we have our great friends from Hillwood High School here to share a little bit about their work. So I'll allow them to come up and introduce themselves and share their story. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rudra Patel, and I'm a senior at Hillwood High School. I'm in the Business and Hospitality Academy, pursuing the Hospitality and Tourism pathway. So overall, I really enjoyed my high school experience so far. There are endless amount of things that I can talk about, but what sums it up is the freedom and flexibility that Hillwood offers. We offer around 18 AP classes and a variety of honors classes, meaning that students can choose their course load. And on top of this, we offer a large amount of dual credit and dual enrollment classes, making it so that students have even more options on how they want to prepare for their future. Within my AP classes, teachers are approachable and always willing to help. What has impacted me most in high school is the discussions that these teachers create. So in one day, we can be debating on whether or not Supreme Court judges should serve for life. And then in another day, we can talk about how racism impacts different aspects of our society with my peers. Having these hard conversations is so important because to me, they challenge your mind to think in new ways and form better, well-supported opinions. Another aspect of Hillwood that's impactful is diversity, and this goes for a lot of things. There's diverse demographics, meaning that you can meet people from cultures around the world, and with this comes a diversity of thought, which forces you to analyze your opinions. And there's a diversity of extracurriculars. You can always find something that aligns with your interest or create it yourself. Personally, I signed up for a lot of public speaking clubs, and to this day, it is something that has transformed me compared to my old self. After I graduate, I plan to go to college to pursue a bachelor's in computer science so I can hopefully become a software engineer. I know I'll be well prepared for what lies ahead due to the experiences that Hillwood has given me. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Meredith Romero, and I am a senior at Hillwood High School. The academies we have at our school have been very beneficial for me and my journey throughout high school. At Hillwood, I am a part of the Business and Hospitality Academy under the Hospitality and Marketing pathway. Our academy coaches have been working with us as a student ever since sophomore year. Personally, my teacher, Mr. Bishop, has been able to mold me in a certain way. I say this because in my earlier years in high school, I was always the student who would be in the corner, not really talking or interacting with the class, but I would still get my work done. Granted, it hasn't been my best work, but it's made me who I am today. What I love about all of our academies is that our teachers and our coaches aren't just trying to get us to get our work done, but they are actually physically and mentally trying to help us and work with us to grow as people in both our personal and professional lives. Because of this, I have been able to branch out and join a variety of clubs and activities, specifically DECA. DECA has allowed me to practice professionalism and business aspects in which I wish to continue studying in, and I will actually be competing in our state competition next week. In all, I appreciate having more adults in my life that care about me and what's next in my future. Next year, I will go on to study marketing and entrepreneurship here in Nashville at Belmont University. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ellie Rubin, and I'm currently a senior at Hillwood High School in the Art, Design, and Communications Academy with a pathway in fine arts. I'm honored to talk with you today about how the dance program at Hillwood has impacted the energy and the environment for the better. Our dance program has been a huge part of my high school experience, as well as inspired me to continue dancing through at least college, and I will be attending College of Charleston for dance. Please, people don't expect us to have a fully functioning dance studio on school grounds, so it's very cool to get to show that off. Personally, dancing at school has allowed me to keep a steady track because along with taking multiple dance classes a year, I can also take honors and AP classes as well. We also have incredible opportunities to work with different departments in the arts department, such as our theater group, and with that, our most recent production of Elf the Musical was great because, cool collaboration, right? Personally, I'm involved with the low incidence student at our school who takes our ballet/modern class. For all of these reasons and more, the dance program at Hillwood has truly made my high school experience what it is. Thank you.
Abigail.
Thank you all for the opportunity to share this evening.
No, thank you, young people, for sharing with us and showing your professionalism. Ready to swing this down? Say a word.
I'll come to the back. No, I'm a great people up here. Thinking about Coach Bass filming my wedding in the bushes, so.
Oh, my God.
But thank you, I'm glad she acknowledged
Yes, that was, because I couldn't
Don't
do
want
it.
to get you emotional again, but.
Good to see you, yeah.
Thank you all for doing that.
Thanks, Steve.
That's my coach. No, when I say if you know Coach Bass, that was some Coach Bass stuff to do. Yeah, he said Coach Bass filmed his wedding in the bushes. Okay, you ready?
I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy trying not to cry early.
All right, so that closes out our awards and recognitions. We will now move on to our director's report, centered around core tenet 3, creating and supporting engaging, rigorous, and personalized learning experiences for all students. Dr. Battle?
Thank you again, Chair Buggs and board members. All right, first, I want to celebrate that this week is Public Schools Week across the nation. Public schools, our teachers, our students, staff, and boards have been incredibly strained over the last couple of years. It is important to celebrate the successes while working to address the inequities and challenges that existed before and during the pandemic, so that we can come out even stronger as we move beyond COVID and into our future. So again, make sure that you're celebrating public education and all the great work that's happening every day on behalf of our community. All right, so the number of COVID-19 cases has continued to decline week over week since the high of 1,225 cases reported on January 30th. We had 132 positive cases among students reported last week and 46 staff members. That's still higher than at various points during the last semester, but a substantial improvement over what we experienced a few weeks ago. Countywide, the 7-day average positivity rate was down to 14.5% in the latest health department report, which is still on the high end for where a positivity rate should be, but a decline from the nearly 40% numbers we saw a few weeks ago. Likewise, the cases per 100,000 residents have declined to 36.1, which is also on the higher end of where numbers should be, but is still a dramatic improvement. In other words, the situation in MNPS and around Nashville is improving, but not necessarily improved to where we hope to be at generally. However, we have progressed rapidly to the point we're at today, and we hope the progress will continue at this pace. Based on these factors, my recommendation is that we sunset our mask requirements after Friday, March 11th, which is the last day before spring break. So then when students return to classes after spring break, masks will be encouraged for those who want to wear them, but optional. However, this assumes that the numbers continue to trend in the right direction and will allow the opportunity to revisit that recommendation at the March 8th board meeting if we have new information.
Thank you all so much for being here. Please continue to let Dr. Battle fulfill her duty as our director. Go ahead, Dr. Battle.
Thank you. So if we have new information at the time, it gives you an opportunity to review it before spring break. One other protocol that is going to change is our contact tracing. The Metro Public Health Department, in accordance with the state guidance and other public health agencies, is moving away from contact tracing as we've known it due to the higher transmissibility of this latest COVID variant. As you know, our school nurse program is a partnership with the health department. So going forward, instead of having nurses trace individual contacts, if there is an exposure in a classroom, the entire class will be notified. Individual close contacts may still be identified and notified under certain circumstances. As our district ended the practice of requiring quarantines for close contacts a few months ago, this should not have a significant impact on school operations.
You will not forget, though, you're all.
Thank you so much for being here. We continue to ask that you be quiet during this meeting. You are free to send any suggestions, questions, or concerns you have to the school board. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to pause and clear the room, if you don't mind, and then we'll take a 2-minute recess.
Please exit the room.
We're not going to do this today.
Everyone, please exit.
Go right ahead.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to proceed with an update around our MNPS hiring fair that took place on February 19th, which was this past Saturday. I wanted to give a specific shout out to our human resources team and school leaders who came out on Saturday to showcase our district and our schools to prospective teachers and those looking to make a shift in the district next year. More than 50% of those who pre-registered attended the event, and a quarter of those walked away with an early agreement at the school or district level. Along with many new connections and job prospects who will be contacted in the next weeks and months to come to have a great quality experience and to be great quality teachers at all of our schools in the upcoming year. I've heard from many principals who said this was the best hiring fair that they've ever attended. And so again, I want to celebrate our Chief of Human Resources, Melissa Roberge, along with Amber Tyus, our Director of Talent Acquisition, along with the hiring managers and school leaders who made the event a success. Kudos to you all, and thank you for your hard work. Let's give them a round of applause. Now it is my pleasure to invite up Dr. Paul Changus, our Executive Officer of Research Assessment and Evaluation, to discuss our recent winter administration of our MAP grades, grades 2 through 9. As he's coming up, I'm just going to give a few remarks that will kind of ground us in the MAP conversation, because over a year ago, I shared that we had a lot of progress that we needed to make with our students, and we recognized that we needed to go back to basics in order to make forward progress and success for our students. We have the data that shows us exactly where our students are, and we are committed to our families that we're going to leverage that data and ensure that all of our students are known. We're definitely on that path forward, and we'll keep working towards that as we move forward. We've committed ourselves to moving into a period of recovery and then quickly into acceleration and getting the fundamental inflection points right. We knew we needed 3 things to be in place, and that was that we needed to personalize the educational experiences of our students. We knew that we needed a thriving and strong culture and climate, and we knew that we needed talent to be retained and recruited into the district. So our formula is simple. That is quality teachers and staff plus quality leadership plus quality instruction equals student growth and success for our students. So with that, Dr. Changus, I'm going to kick it over to you for you to lead us through a review and recap of our winter administration.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. And I'm going to go over the MAP results from January. This was our second assessment of the year. We did our first assessment in August and September. As I think we're all well aware, that the MAP assessment supports 2 of our core tenets: supporting and monitoring a personalized learning experience for all students, and the disaggregated data from MAP is important in helping us identify inequities between student groups. The growth data from MAP is one of our primary measures of a couple of our focused outcomes, literacy and numeracy growth, but also is important in helping us determine if students are prepared as they transition to the next tier. And you can see highlighted on this slide a number of signature initiatives that MAP supports, either helping us to identify students or evaluate progress of those initiatives. So I'm going to highlight a few of the key points from January. The assessment finished on January 28th. From the 18th to the 28th, we also had 1 week of makeup assessments for students who were quarantined and unable to test prior to the 28th. We had an increase of about 1,000 students from what we tested back in August. We tested over 36,000 students, and over 94% of students enrolled in grades 2 through 9. Our English language arts scores continue to be somewhat higher than we have in mathematics relative to students nationally. In other words, those national percentile scores are higher for those students. The academic growth between August and January was greater for mathematics than it was in language arts, and as you, I'm sure, well aware, we had a greater impact during the pandemic on math than we saw in language arts. But the good news is our growth in both subjects exceeded the national average, so we're seeing the kinds of growth that we saw prior to the pandemic. And while the overall academic growth was strong, achievement gaps do remain for our economically disadvantaged students, or students with disabilities, and English learners. This is not a new phenomenon. As everyone's aware, we've had wide gaps. While we saw all subgroups making progress, when subgroups are making comparable progress, those gaps remain. Again, what we're seeing is consistent with what we see in our statewide data and national data in terms of the achievement gaps. We don't have other data yet in terms of the growth or the progress that other districts are making so far this year. When we look at the results grade by grade, here you have the number tested from August and January, and then the median national percentile. And as a reminder, the median national percentile is looking at our typical student. If we find the middle score when we rank students at every grade, the percent of students that child scored higher than nationally. And those norms were established in 2020, but they were based on what happened in the 2018-19 school year. The analysis was followed. In other words, these are norms established prior to the pandemic in a normal school year. And if you look at that bottom row, you see that our scores went from a 36 overall to a 38 in January. In other words, we made a 2 percentile increase relative to students nationally. This is one indication of growth that exceeded the national average. You can also see that we're up in most grades, held steady at 5th grade, a little bit of a decline in 9th grade, but the growth is greater in those elementary grades, particularly 2 through 4. And as a reminder, our Literacy Imagined work, our Literacy Reimagined began in K through 5. And this year we're addressing training in secondary schools. But that's where we saw the biggest improvement. Middle school grades, for the most part, are up as well. That was language arts. When we look at mathematics, again, we're seeing overall a 2 percentile increase in terms of student performance from the beginning of the year. You'll also notice again that these scores, that the language arts scores are higher than the math scores across the board, across grade levels. Now, most grades did see improvement. We saw a decline at the 5th grade. We also saw 9th grade hold steady. And again, those are 2 transition grades when students are typically transitioning to new schools, although that's changing in the 5th grade. That was looking at our typical child. This is looking at our distribution of scores across the achievement scale. At the far left, the first quintile, those are students who score below the 20th percentile, or in the bottom 20% nationally. To the far right, we see the students scoring at the upper end of the scale. The top 20% would be the 5th quintile. The gold bars represent our scores from August. The blue bars, our scores from January. What we hope to see is declining numbers on the left and increasing numbers on the right. And as you can see, we had about a 3 percentage point decline in our lowest achieving groups. Those students are moving up in the average and high average range. We did see about a 1 point decline in the 5th quintile, but for the most part, we're seeing movement from left to right, which means students moving up the scale somewhat. In mathematics, the pattern's even clearer. We consistently see declines to the left, a 4 percentage point decrease in the percentage of students in the bottom quintile. Again, the bottom quintile are typically going to be students in need of intervention. Students in the 5th quintile are generally going to be on track or mastered on a TCAP assessment. There's a high correlation between those. Students in the 4th quintile tend to be those students who have a good shot at being on track, but that cut score on those state assessments is pretty high and generally somewhere in the middle of the 4th quintile. But you can see we saw increases in the percent average, and high in mathematics. So again, consistent favorable trend across quintiles with a shift from left to right. This is a visual representation of our achievement data, looking at all students, our race ethnicity subgroups, with the median national percentile being the measure here, then our economically disadvantaged students with disabilities, English learners. Again, we're seeing wide achievement gaps. These have been persistent for decades across assessments. You can see that the difference for economically disadvantaged students is a little over 20 percentile points, almost 30 points for students with disabilities, even larger for English learners. Now, this is one-time measures of achievement, not our growth data. In mathematics, similar trends. In every subgroup, if we compare language arts to mathematics, every subgroup is doing better on the language arts portion than the mathematics portion in terms of their relative standing to students nationally. Now, there's a lot of data in this table. Just to unpack it a bit, first we have the student group, all students, followed by students by tier, by race, ethnicity, and our economically disadvantaged students with disabilities, English learners, limited English proficient. The next 3 columns are our growth data over the last 3 years for language arts, the percent of students who met or exceeded their projection. In other words, they maintained or exceeded their ranking among students nationally in terms of their ranking. And so anytime we see a number above 50%, it means that we've seen growth above the national average. And what you can see for language arts in the bold is that we exceeded 50% for all but a couple of our subgroups. And those 2 subgroups are very close to the national average. But we saw all students, 53%, met or exceeded their targets. Not only is that almost 10 points higher than we saw this time last year, but it's even higher than we saw prior to the pandemic in the 2020 results in the 1920 school year. Similarly, in mathematics, the growth is even higher, almost 58% of students meeting their projections across grades, across subgroups. Every subgroup exceeded the national average. Gains were more than 10 points higher than last year and a couple of points higher than we saw in 2020. And you can see, again, across subgroups that growth is pretty consistent, and that's, again, while in the one-time measures we continue to see those achievement gaps. But you'll see on mathematics, too, that our English learners and limited English proficient held their own quite well compared to their colleagues. To put this in a little more context, if we compare the growth this year to last year, we have 8,575 more students hitting their projections across grades 2 through 9 in language arts. and 10,456 more students that met their growth projections in mathematics. So this is a pretty significant shift. Just a visual presentation of the current growth data for this year. And again, you can see that unlike what we saw for the one-time measures of achievement, growth is pretty comparable from subgroup to subgroup. For language arts, again, almost all of our subgroups are hitting that 50% national average. In mathematics, all of our subgroups exceeded the national average. And again, consistent growth. So these things don't happen just by chance in terms of the data we see. At the school level, we know that schools are analyzing their data. They're responding to the changes from MTSS, aligning tiered interventions, reviewing Tier 1 instructional practices for improvements. We know that high dosage tutoring is underway, and we're seeing some positive results there with accelerating scholars. At the executive director level, they're conducting their own analyses, talking with principals and identifying what's working and next steps. Aligning the resources, obviously, that we provide. The work occurs, we know, at the classroom level, at the school level. Our role is to provide those supports and those resources. At the teaching and learning level, at the support hub level, I can tell you that Dr. Battle and our cabinet and our executive leadership team meet on a regular basis to go through data. I'll just be honest, this is the most data-focused support hub I've been a part of. And, you know, we try to identify what's working and where there are gaps and opportunities. Again, it's about monitoring progress of our initiatives and aligning those resources. Summarizing, 3 key takeaways from all of the data that we saw. Median national percentiles increased in both literacy and numeracy. You saw a 2-point increase, and again, that's 2 points in a normal school year. The percent of students meeting growth targets has rebounded. We're seeing the kinds of growth and even accelerated growth compared to where we were prior to the pandemic. And all subgroups are making those kinds of gains in numeracy and almost all of our subgroups in literacy. The hard work of our teachers and our school leaders is what makes the needle move. Where we provide the support is investing in those high-quality instructional materials that our classroom teachers need, our students need, implementing literacy reimagined with fidelity, the planning, preparing, and implementing of new resources in the summer to begin on day 1 to address the challenge of the bounce back that we're seeing, the intentional supports that teachers plan around so that all students can access quality grade level material for the majority of the day, the interventions that are aligned to specific student needs, the connections that we're making with families, with students through navigators is one of those key initiatives. And of course, multi-tiered systems of support and high-impact tutoring. Our office is trying to get a handle on each of these initiatives and the growth that they're making, but it's a combination of factors that are providing the results that we're seeing today. With regard to the MAP data and next steps from my end, I'll just tell you that the scores have been out there for a while in our data warehouse for educators to access. Classroom teachers have their own data. School leaders have school-wide data. At our level, we can monitor what's happening across our schools. Our families now have access to these new MAP results and the personalized student dashboard. That's live. And we're starting focus groups next week with the assistance of the Parent Advisory Committee to look at some new data visualizations to supplement and support the student dashboard, some more sophisticated graphics that will help us look at longitudinal trends. We also know that as we get prepared for that time of year when the state assessments are coming, that these MAP scores are predictive and help us get an idea of where our students are as we hit those assessments. That concludes my portion. Dr. Battle?
All right, thank you, Dr. Changus, for always giving us such a thorough review of our academic data. Madam Chair, we will turn it back over to you at this time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Battle and staff. Do we have any questions around the report or feedback for the staff? We'll start actually with Ebenezer, Mrs. Masters, Mrs. Player-Peters.
Thank you. So earlier, Dr. Changus, you mentioned a multi-leveled response. In that response, is there a plan to get teachers to sit down one-on-one with students so that the students also understand where they are and what they need to work on when they go home or when they have some extra time?
That's a great question, and hopefully that's occurring across our schools. We know that when those data conversations occur, that the research is clear that it leads to higher student achievement, ownership of the data from students. I can't guarantee you that it's happening in every classroom, but I can tell you that it's happening in many places, and it's something that we continue to push at our level. We're trying also, as I said, to get the information to parents and to families to have that information as well. These scores are also available to students through what they can access through our student information system. But those conversations are important right now, and I hope they're happening across the board.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Masters?
Yeah, I was wondering about, you mentioned that MAP scores are predictive of TN Ready proficiency, and that, it's going to become even more high stakes for us as a district next year with the new legislation around whether or not children are going to be able to advance from third grade. So I'm just wondering, of course, outside of the years when we had weirdness with TN Ready, could you just sort of expand upon that correlation between MAP scores and TN Ready, and exactly how we've determined that is predictive?
Certainly. With MAP assessment, the vendor NWEA has done their own analysis of scores across the state of Tennessee and the schools that they work with. We actually, so the first year that we had new standards on 10 Ready, they didn't have data in order to be able to do those predictions. We did our own as a district, and I saw correlations above 0.8, with one being obviously the highest correlation. But what we have found over multiple years is that we can predict with over 80% accuracy whether or not a student is going to be on track or mastered through these assessments. And we looked at quintile data today, and as I said, there's the cut score somewhere in the middle of that fourth quintile. NWEA actually provides a projection to 10 Ready that schools have access to. It's obviously not a perfect measure. You're going to always have kids on the bubble, but those students, again, above the 80th percentile, odds are very, very good that they're going to be fine on a TCAP assessment. Tennessee has set a very high bar on these assessments for what it means to be on track or mastered. We know that students that are hitting that bar are typically on track for a 21 on an ACT and that type of assessment. But we have a lot of students that we also know who fall below that score, who over time, it may not happen in 1 year, but over time make significant growth. We've seen students in the very bottom quintile over multiple years move into that top group and score above a 21. Those are the kinds of those are the kinds of situations that my office is investigating to try to look at what is an ambitious but realistic target for students year by year who fall into those categories.
Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Player-Peters, and then Mrs. Tyler.
She almost called you Miss Poopy. I caught that. A quick question. You gave some numerical numbers, 10,000, 3,500, around slide 15. Can you repeat those numbers again about the students who improved? It was a 10,000 number and a 3,500.
Certainly. Because sometimes we lose when we just look at percentages,
Yes.
what that really means. So compared to last year, we had for grades 2 through 9 and English language arts, 8,575 more students hit their targets than hit the target last year in terms of growth. In mathematics, we had 10,456 more students meet their math goal. Again, we know we took a significant hit last year. We're seeing, again, the kinds of scores and growth that we saw prior to the 2021 school year, and actually a little bit higher than we saw in 2020.
And thank you for those numbers, because I think, just as you said in the beginning, it's easy to get lost in the percentage and understanding how large our school system is, and when we say a percentage point, what exactly that numerically means. And so the fact that we literally had thousands of students improve their test scores is something that we should celebrate and that we shouldn't shy away from, and understand that our narrative is that we are committed to improving proficiency and test scores, and this is a pathway to prove it and show that it's actually being done, and that we're committed to it. So thank you for breaking that down in a layman's terms. And the second part, on slide 9, there was a slight fall within ninth graders. Is that out? I mean, we obviously know the pandemic effect. Is there another reason for that? Is that just a transition from middle school to high school? So there's an adjustment period. Do you have any clue, or is it too early to tell? Compared to the other grades, you see improvement, and then is that a natural dip? Is that a natural trend?
That's a great question, and to be honest, I'm not sure we'll know for sure until we see what happens when we get our high school end of course exams back, and when we have pretty much all of our students testing on tests that are a little higher stakes and have some impact. These I'll just tell you that I think what you're probably aware of, high school students sometimes are a little harder to motivate on a test that doesn't count into their grades, and whereas elementary students will just, keep on keeping on. And that's probably a factor sometimes with our ninth grade data. The ninth grade assessment is a general language arts and mathematics assessment. It's not aligned to a specific high school course. As you may be aware, this year our curriculum and instruction team has been working to implement some end-of-course benchmarks, assessments aligned to our scope and sequence, which I think are probably a little better indicator of how those students are progressing in those courses. So a little of it may be some fatigue with students, but I don't want to overreact to the number yet, but we'll have a better indication as we get into the tests that are coming.
Well, I just want to thank you for having good measurement tools to be able to really see how we're improving. I mean, it's not the end goal, but growth is important. I know sometimes we can't always meet the benchmark the way we would like to or as quick as we like to, but I think it's crucial that we as a board, and more importantly, parents and community members, understand that there's growth, and you cannot reach a target until there's growth. And the fact that in this short period of time, dealing with the pandemic and dealing with the national disasters that we had beforehand, that we're starting to see real progress in real time, that I'll be very honest, I thought we may not see until next year. The fact that we're seeing growth immediately, I want to commend, let me rephrase that, fully answer there. Commend what the teachers, what the staff, what the leadership has done to really
leadership for making the architectural frame for it, and then the teachers and the support staff to implement it, and the students to really step up. Given the time of everything that we have done is not easy. And so I just really want to recognize and just give you kudos for that. And I know we have a long way to go, and this is not to stop holding Dr. Battle or the leadership accountable for continued growth and make sure we hit those targets, but we need to recognize and give victory to what has been accomplished and just give you kudos for that.
And I can't speak for the rest of Dr. Battle's team, but I can tell you I was very relieved to see the data because none of us knew exactly what we were going to see this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Tyler. Any questions?
Yeah, okay. So I've got a bunch of questions. So can you explain to everybody, how does the state set its cut score?
Well, I can tell you that this, so to give you just a little bit of context, prior to, in the early years of our state assessments, and I was at the state when TCAP began in 1990, we had high school graduation exams that were minimal proficiency exams. We, as a state, identified a pretty low bar for what it took to be proficient and on track. We were giving a nationally normed test as TCAP at that time. I was not at the state when they moved to assessments aligned to our standards, our state standards, although I had been a proponent of that shift. But we had a very low bar where roughly 85 to 90% of Tennessee students were considered proficient. And then the National Assessment of Educational Progress came out and identified that our standards were about the second lowest nationally, and that the students we identified as proficient were not necessarily college and career ready. So around 2010 became the first big shift where educators, teachers, supervisors of instruction, directors of schools from a sample of districts across the state were brought together to review the data from Tennessee, to look at test content, and to set standards that we felt would be better aligned to what it took to be, and I'll just tell you, ACT scores were used as kind of a standard for college and career readiness. And what did that mean at other grade levels? But there was a process that teachers went through, test content, and identified items that they felt identified a proficient student. And then the state, with their vendor, the test vendor, ran numbers from their pilot data to say, this is the percentage of students who met that standard. They compared that to the national data. All of that's to say there was a process, a give and take. And not every grade level came back to the same point, but it was set by Tennessee educators, but also with a little bit of pressure to say, we need to set the bar. And I'll be honest, I was very surprised at how high the bar was set, because we went from the second lowest to the second highest standards in the nation, and we've gone even higher in 2016. We made the last shift. So a lot of students on our exams who are not scoring at the on-track level, who are, say, approaching, would do just fine on some of the exams that other states are administering, because the bars are very different from state to state. So that's probably more than you wanted to know,
that was
but
perfect.
it's a very detailed process.
It is.
And the
I feel like
data
more
is a
people need
big
to know it.
component.
Thank you. And then I guess knowing that that the ACT plays a role in that cut score, to me, that's looking to make sure our kids are college ready, but that doesn't really address whether our kids are career ready. Do you think that we are doing a disservice to our students who are choosing not to go to college, but instead are choosing a career path?
I'm gonna approach that question carefully, but I'll just say that I do think there's more that we can do than just the current assessments. I do know that the state is looking at some other assessments that do get into some work readiness skills and some other areas. And as someone who's worked with standardized tests for over 40 years, I think sometimes we fall back on them too often as the measure. They're one critical measure, but there are other skills that are important too, especially when you talk about being career ready. So I don't know if we'll go that direction as a state, but I do understand that there are conversations occurring. Certainly, there are things we can do in our classrooms that are occurring to supplement what a standardized test provides to build those skills.
That's good to know. And I know I've talked about it with you before, but you know I'm not a huge fan of bell curves, using them as the way to check out how our students are doing. So just kind of a refresher. So when we look at a bell curve, the third quintile should represent what the typical student achieves, correct? With the
Yes,
average student,
the third
yes.
quintile would be pretty much your average student.
Yes. So if our third quintile represents that typically developing average student, that should mean that the students in the third quintile are exactly where they're supposed to be developmentally. So should our parents be concerned if their children are in that third quintile?
Again, that's a very challenging question, because those are students who are pretty much on grade level if you define it based on the norm. And for years, that's how we defined being on grade level. At one time, one of the key measures that the district used was what % of students are at the 50th percentile or higher, which is, the national average. We now know that being at the 50th or the 60th percentile is probably not going to get you proficiency on these state exams. So all that's to say, we certainly don't want to be content to say that everything's fine when a child's at the third quintile, when that may not be a predictor of the college and career readiness test, or at least the college readiness test that we give at the high school level. But those students are going to be productive citizens and very capable. We're always going to push to get students to do well, to have the options that they want to have when they graduate, and to go whatever direction they want to go. But if they're at the third quintile, they're going to be functioning like a typical student at their grade level in Tennessee, across the country, et cetera.
I think, again, we've kind of skewed more towards the college ready as opposed to career ready. And I think that there is some value in remembering this is one data point in a whole lifetime of what a child is, of who a child is and who they're going to become. So I think that's important to keep in mind, especially as parents get these scores back and they feel like they're failing their child when their child is literally exactly where they're supposed to be developmentally. Doesn't mean that you're not going to push them, because I think, like you said, we should. But that doesn't mean that they are behind. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about MAP and FAST. Can you talk to me a little bit about what's the difference between the MAP test and the FAST test?
I can, I'll try to give you just a little bit of an overview. The FAST is our universal screener, and it's essentially looking at our basic skills, the foundational skills that are critical in reading. You're going to have concepts of print, letter naming, letter sounds, word reading, those types of things that are assessed. And students are going to pretty much take the same assessment at grade level, at their grade level. With the MAP assessment, it's standards-based, not skills-based, and it's going to focus more on the understanding and the comprehension portion of the test. Some of the skills that in those lower grades that we're looking at, I mentioned reading comprehension and prerequisite standards, vocabulary knowledge, reading literature and informational text for comprehending, making inferences, predicting, drawing conclusions, determining key ideas. Those types of things are going to be assessed. It's focused more on those comprehensions areas, evaluating from a text, evaluating the author's craft and point of view and purpose. For literature, the purpose in interpreting figurative language are things that would be assessed. You know, it serves a different function, and it is, again, attempting to be aligned to assessing the standards that Tennessee assesses. Even though it's nationally normed, the Tennessee standards are utilized in the MAP test in Tennessee, and we get feedback on those standards.
So I'm kind of just a little concerned about test fatigue for our kids taking so many tests all together, especially this spring when we're including the Tennessee Ready test and that mixture as well. So I really just wanted to kind of get your thoughts about why we're using both. Clearly, they're looking at different things. The list you were just given, I want to make sure I heard you correctly, that, you know, understanding, comprehension, vocab knowledge, predicting, drawing, conclude, all that was for the FAST test, is that correct?
No, that's
That
the
was
MAP
test,
assessment.
okay.
Yeah. For FAST, concepts of print, letter naming, letter sounds, and we can actually provide you with some and the board with some examples of the types of items that are assessed. Sight words would be part of that, onset sounds. And I'm not the FAST expert. Our office, curriculum and instruction, oversees the FAST testing, but it's looking at very foundational skills. And again, it's our universal screener, helps us identify where students may need intervention in those basic reading skills.
And could we not get that from the MAP test?
Where we have used MAP, as the initial portion, initial screener, but there are requirements that the state has in terms of the screening process and recommendations. And to be honest, there's some skills that are not assessed through MAP that are foundational skills that are important. Finding the right balance, I understand, is a challenge, and we're in the middle of a process right now to reevaluate as our contracts have run out for both FAST and MAP to look at where we are going forward. If we can find a more comprehensive approach, we certainly hope to do so.
I would definitely encourage anything that gives you the information that you need and does not put even more pressure or take time away from teaching, because when you're taking a test, you're not learning something new. So we want to make sure that we're actually having the time to teach our kids and move them forward so that when they do take the next test, they're able to show that difference.
And I will say that with our teaching and learning team and curriculum and instruction, that we've been having those kinds of conversations for a while, and we're hopeful that going forward we're going to be at a point. You know, there are a lot of things we're trying to do with these assessments, and obviously the most critical piece is helping teachers identify what students need. But we also are trying to be predictive, monitor the progress of our students at our level, but also predict to these high-stakes assessments that are coming. And
I mean, the FAST sounds a lot like what the purple folder used to be. I don't know if you were here for that. That's what I used to use when I was teaching.
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like that, and that's not quite as high stakes, but still gives you the same information. So I really appreciate that you guys are having these discussions and that you are thinking about what is best for these children. I mean, it's great when we have data points, but we also need to think about what's developmentally appropriate for our students. Last question. Now that we're having to report our scores to the state, are we reporting MAP scores, or are we using a different assessment to report to the state?
We were asked to provide our universal screening data, and the vendor for FAST provided that data directly to the state. But because we're using MAP assessment, and there was some overlap with certain portions of FAST, there was a component of FAST that wasn't administered because it overlaps with MAP. And again, to get to the point, we don't want to test more than we have to. And because that component was missing, we were also asked to provide our MAP scores for those lower grades to the state. So they have both of those measures.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. That answers my questions for now.
All right, Mrs. Poopa Walker, and then Mrs. Bush. Okay. All right, Mrs. Bush, any other questions?
Yes, real quick. I know in the past we would break down our ethnicities by female and males. Do you have that information? Because I don't see it on this report. And the reason why I'm asking, because of course we know that our kids of color and our EL students are highly, I would say the scores are a lot less, lower than others. So I would like to see that breakdown, if you have that information.
We can certainly provide that. I can tell you in our data warehouse, we do break the data down by gender as well, and by ethnicity and gender typically. We can certainly provide that. It's not one of the categories that we're held accountable from the state, but it does provide useful information for our educators. So
right.
We will share that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I'll go.
Okay, Mr. Little.
And really adding to Ms. Player Peters and Ms. Masters, just what's the growth goal? Is it in the presentation that we have for our students? And based on the growth goal, if they continue to hit that growth goal, will they be on grade level by the duration when they finish?
That's a great question, because the growth goal is defined by the vendor, the test company, as at least meeting your ranking, your national ranking, your percentile score. So if you're at the 40th percentile in August, are you at least at the 40th percentile the next time you take the test? And again, the goal is set by the vendor. But we actually have the opportunity to set our own goals beyond that. And I know that in the MAP online website, teachers can create their own goals. The ideal situation is when the student and the teacher set, and hopefully the family, set that goal together. And that's one of the things that my office has been working on when I talk about setting ambitious targets that would be above the norm for those students. Now, if a child's at the 95th percentile and holding their own, they're going to be just fine. If they're at the 30th percentile, the 20th percentile, they're not going to be on grade level as we define it in terms of proficiency. So those are the students we want to exceed their ranking. And again, we have students that we know have made incredible growth from year to year. And what we're trying to do is come up with some, not a goal, but kind of a range that would predict over multiple years that if you're in the third or fourth grade and you're in the bottom or second quintile, you've got a lot of time to move up that chart, and you can make a little bit of growth above the national average year in and year out, and eventually get to a 21 or an ACT. That goal is going to have to be a little more ambitious, though, if you're in middle school and in those ranges. And so we're trying to find out what the parameters are that are realistic in terms of those kinds of goals. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter what we say the target is. You've got to own it. You've got to have that conversation as a student, as a teacher, and hopefully be able to say, I need to get one or two more items right on the next test, and make it something that's meaningful to the student.
Yep. And the reason I'm asking is because I put this in front of a parent trying to get their perspective, because we say a lot of different things. And so how would you describe a 2% percentile increase? What does that mean?
So as a general rule, a 1 point gain can be pretty much measurement error. A 2 point gain is considered where we start to see what we call an educational effect. And in a district our size, Measurement error is virtually nothing because we have so many students that it's not random chance when their scores go up more than 1 point in either direction. So I'll just say, for me, it's a good start. We haven't made up the ground yet from the pandemic, but this is a pretty good step for just half a year, and hopefully we can continue this through the rest of the school year.
I would ask if we can use like education talk, but also try to trim it down where like just parents can understand it, because I'm reading it like, what is a 2% percentile? Like I can say it, I can speak it, but I don't know what it is. And for our parents to look at map data when they get it home and interpret it, they have to understand, one parent told me her child, scored 300 on a reading assessment, and she thought it was good, but he was in the 5th grade, and I think that means he was on the 3rd grade reading level. So she was excited, but she didn't understand it. So we have to somehow get it to where just regular everyday parents understand if you're not in the field of education.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Dr. Changus, could you just speak briefly about some of the supporting documentation and kind of conversation protocols that your team has worked on to help parents with that?
Yeah, and we have been working on some materials that are available to families that are links within the student dashboard that help with the interpretation of tests. And to be perfectly honest, as someone who's worked with test scores for longer than I'd like to admit, it's an ongoing, it takes repetition and hearing this again and again. And we want our teachers to be able to support families and truly understanding what that means. But we're putting materials together. As I said, we're providing in the process of developing some new reports. And we've got some visualizations that we think are helpful, but now we're putting the context around it to the interpretation guides that go with that. We've also got some videos that have been developed to walk families through that. But this, if I've learned anything in all this time, it's you can never make anything too simple. It's challenging to put it in terms that we can all grasp. Even understanding a 2 percentile increase, that essentially means that our typical child has passed up 2 out of 100 students nationally, but what does that mean in terms of my actual performance on a test? That's why if we can break it down to a classroom assessment and getting 1 or 2 more items right and helping a child understand what that means for them on a given assessment, what it means in terms of how prepared they are for these state assessments and where they're likely to fall. I'll just say that's an ongoing challenge.
Yep. And then my last comment, Ms. Masters brought up something as we think about the state law, the retention on the 3rd grade. And as we look at our MAP scores, if there were any projections, is that something that we could talk about as a board before the law becomes final?
Well, certainly we can have that conversation.
It's a pretty big law. I mean, it can affect thousands of students, and I think is it a tsunami? Is it a surf wave? I think it'd be good to know.
I think that we'll have that conversation another time. I'll just tell you, I've been on some state advisory committees in the past. I've never recommended one test being the end all. I was on a state advisory committee that reviewed our graduation exam and proposed alternatives to having one test be the gatekeeper for graduation.
That's it, Ms.
All right, thank you. All right, Dr. Battle?
Yeah, as Dr. Changus wraps up his portion of the presentation, again, just want to take this moment to commend our teachers, our principals, our entire staff. This doesn't just happen. And it just, again, is another representation of their work. They're ensuring that students are on a path towards success. And I don't think it can be understated that we're talking about a rebound to pre-pandemic and acceleration. And that's exactly what we were looking for. not knowing exactly how much time that would take. This is a positive moment for us and a moment for us to build on, that we should celebrate our teams around, our school teams, for just their hard work and their dedication. And again, it's another representation that they've not stopped teaching and educating and supporting our students to the best of their ability. So more to come. We should be optimistic about what we're seeing today and continue to build from it. Thank you, Dr. Changus.
All right, thank you, Dr. Battle. Did you have your hand up, Mrs. Walker? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. After the director's report, you wanted to have an actionable item. Go right ahead, Mrs. Walker.
To just go ahead and make a motion to adopt Dr. Battle's recommendation on going.
Pull your mic closer.
I wanted to make a motion to adopt Dr. Battle's recommendation to move to mask recommended on March 11th.
I second. I third it.
All right, okay, we have a motion and a second. We need to open to discussion. So we'll go Mrs. Bush, then Mrs. Tyler, Mrs. Masters, and then Ebenezer and Anjali. Okay, let me write that down for us.
Thank you, Chairwoman Buggs. I'm just going to be a little bit long-winded tonight with this. Finally, we got a chance to bring this back up for discussion. And two words stuck out to me tonight. Chairwoman Buggs had mentioned passion. And passion comes from parents wanting to make choice for their children. Passion comes from that. Next month will be 2 years of this pandemic. Okay, 2 years. And yet we have made the worst mistakes over these 2 years that I've ever seen before. We kept our students out for a year because we wanted to follow some type of metric that no one understood. We kept them out for a year. Then we kicked them off the fields and not played their sports when other districts, children were playing their sports, when other students were in school. Yeah. So we made those two mistakes. Then we come back after parents had to stand up as constituents and reach out to their state reps, the legislature, in order to get these students back into the classroom. Because we were following some kind of metric that didn't make any sense. And because of that, we are faced with generations of children that's going to suffer for a long time. So here we are again. Talking about something that we shouldn't even be talking about. It should be the choice of parents and the pediatricians or the doctors making a decision for their students, not this board. And I'm going to say this because I'm a parent. I have to look at my 16-year-old every day, and I have to remind him, you can take off your mask. And he looks at me and says, oh, yeah, I forgot. I'm not at school. Why does he have to do that? And why is it that teachers are so frustrated where they want to stay focused on teaching the children, but they can't because they have been directed and told you have to tell them to keep their mask up? They have to focus and pivot away from learning to talk about a mask. That shouldn't even be on our agenda. We have bigger fish to fry, and not to keep dealing with masks when the numbers are down, okay? There's not a state mandate. There's not a city mandate. There's not a mandate in the city. I mean, I keep saying that. We don't have a mandate to wear masks in government buildings, state buildings, what do you call those? Titans, stadiums, our stadiums, Preds, everybody, we're having fun. They're having fun, but our kids have to suffer. Our kids have to be picked apart every single time to get tied up into some foolishness that the adults at this table is doing. And then I think about across this country, this is the reason why boards, I've never seen boards across this country get into so many fights and arguments with parents because they won't let parents raise their children and make decisions. That's a dangerous thing that we're playing here because parents, we need them. We need their support. We need them in the classroom to volunteer when we don't have no subs or we don't have teachers. But they don't want to touch it because of the way we treat the children, and we don't respect them as parents. And that has to stop. That has to stop because the power and control that the city continues to see, this is Nashville. We should have a school system that is top-notch, that's shining just like this city. But instead, we continue to go against the grain of our parents. That's the reason why the legislatures keep making the laws. Have you noticed? They keep making the laws to do what? Take over school boards. You can't go back virtual. They made that a law. And they also made a law that parents should have options that we're not even following.
Yes. Yes.
So now you ask yourself, board, are we doing justice by keeping this up? We're not. And we need to take a step back and look at what we're doing because we're not winning. We're not winning. The parents should have the power. The parents, not us. We're here to make sure that the district is moving forward, making sure that our kids are educated, making sure that they get all the supports they need in order to be college and career ready. But making these kind of medical decisions for our students is dangerous. And we need to remove ourselves out of the equation and let these kids have options. These kids are played by the books. They have played by them. They have done everything we asked them to do, and yet they're the ones that are suffering. We can do whatever we want to in this city, but when it comes to the schoolhouse, we have to tell them they got to mask up. And if you mask up, then you're going to get in trouble. You're going to be isolated. Teachers, you better do your job of making sure the masks are pulled up. They don't even wear them. They don't even wear them right. They don't wear them like that because they're tired. They're fatigued. Now, if you want to wear them, absolutely. That's what it's called optional. You can still wear your mask. Children can still wear their mask. But I tell you, when that gentleman came and told me about his daughter who was disabled, where she was blind in one eye, her left eye, and she has to wear glasses, and that she still has to wear a mask on her face, and she can't see because her glasses fog up. And she's already disabled. She already needs support. How dare us do something like that? Why are we doing this? We should stop it tonight. Yes. Tonight. It doesn't have anything to do with going to March 11th. We should stop this tonight because these are their children. And my child, my son. Okay, so I should have options. I sit on this board and I comply, and I tell my son to comply. But they're tired. They're tired. And it's not fair that next month it'll be 2 years, and we're still at this point. Yes. And we have other things to worry about. This is a complete distraction. Every county that's touching us have mass options. They do. But it's always Metro Nashville Public Schools who has to suffer. Always. Why? Our students are just as beautiful and shiny than any other student across this state. But then we still want to continue this muscle. I'm in charge. You're not going to tell me what to do, but it's a dangerous game we're playing. That's the reason why all over this country, boards have been getting into this situation, because you're crossing over into the wrong lane. That's the problem. Now I'm going to read something because this really kind of resonated to me, because I know teachers are really tired. I get it all the time. Of course, I'm sure the board has gotten plenty of emails and talked about mass options and what it's doing to the children and what it's doing in the classroom as far as the distractions. And this is pretty sad. Hey, Fran, just wanted to say that I am so glad to talk of mass is on the agenda tonight. I hope that the board can make the decision to move forward with mass being optional. If you only knew how many students don't wear them or wear them correctly while they're fully engaged with other people, you might be amazed. That's been the case, and yet no new skyrocketing numbers. Can I just tell you that although one of my students has been with me since August, I just found out last week that she has dimples. Last week. And she's been having this student since August. I just found out another student of mine has the absolutely best smile. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I just really love to be able to fully get to know my kids without this unnecessary barrier. It's just time. And this is from a teacher. Plenty of teachers that feel like this. So I'm not in favor of waiting until March 11th. I am in favor of us moving this now. That's what we need to be talking about. And I'm tired of the distractions. We need to move forward and give these kids options, give these parents a right to be parents, and let them be able to choose, not this board.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
And it's so frustrating that I sit here and I try my best to not be aggressive, because that's not really the spirit I want to be in, but I'm tired. Every time I see our children suffering, it's frustrating. Every time I look at their faces, it's frustrating because they want to breathe again. They're getting tired of us making these decisions, and they're not even in the equation. You ask the high schoolers, you ask the middle schools and the elementary students, do you like wearing your mask? I have to. No, I don't. Why is it that other people in the city don't have to wear their mask, but we have to wear our mask?
Right.
Can you answer those questions for the students? Can you? They have suffered too long, and yet they don't have a say. And they should have a say. Yep. And parents should be able to parent. Yep. I want to parent my child. Yes. I don't want him to have to feel like that he has to wear a mask, and when he gets home from school, I'm still looking at a mask on his face because he thinks it's a part of his body now. And it's not right. So I'm not in favor of going to March 11th. We can have this discussion on what you all want to do, but you owe it to your constituents of why you don't want to lift it now.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Bush, Mrs. Tyler, then Mrs. Masters, Ebenezer, and Angelique. Go ahead.
All right, I'm just going to start off by saying that I will be voting yes for this. I do think that there is a point in time where we need to recognize that the vaccine has been available for long enough, that everybody who wants it has gotten it. I would like to encourage people who still have not, that this is the best form of protection. It has been proven over and over again. So I do think that I'm okay with loosening up those restrictions, knowing that we have backup plans for safety. All I have been concerned about this whole time has been safety. And I also wanted to address, a lot of people have been talking about not being able to see your face and not being able to have those social interactions. And I agree with you, which is why I have talked to Dr. Battle about you getting clear masks, and she has. There are clear masks available for teachers. There are clear masks available for students. All you have to do is ask for them. I've said it on the board floor a bunch of times, and you can see your whole face. I have asked that they be used, especially in the younger grades, so that the phonics instruction gets seen, so that speech therapy can be, so that these students can have that ability to see the formation of the words, to be able to practice it on their own, and the teacher be able to see that that's actually happening. And at that time, that is the safest way to be able to still see those faces. There are ways to marry safety and concern about social and emotional learning and being able to see faces, because it is important. It matters. And there is a way to do both. And I had to remind everybody that those have always been available, and they are CDC rated. They are rated as being just as good, and because of the way that they have the foam around them. So it's not that you're stepping down to a lesser form of protection. You're not. So I think that we've allowed ourselves to move so far one way, and then we went so far back the other way when we could have been looking for a way to make sure that everybody's needs are being met, where the people who feel like they need the safety because of immunocompromised family members, or elderly family members who are at higher risk, or there are a plethora of reasons that they know that their family needs to be masked, then we can meet them halfway with that clear mask, so that we're still doing what we can in the moment to try to
meet the social and emotional needs, and be safe. So I think with the vaccine available, I'm perfectly fine saying that we can go mask recommended on March 11th.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Tyler. Mrs. Masters?
Thank you. I've been taking in the input that I'm getting. I've been reaching out to the school leaders in my district, been trying to figure out with all the emails coming in who's from my district, to honestly try to get at the desires and wishes of the constituents of District 3. I also inquired about, we've had a mask opt-out request form on our MNPS website since August. I asked about how many of those have been, we've had about 140. So while I understand, coming here and sending emails, I'm also looking at, how many people actually took the time to submit a form saying, given the option, I would like my child to not mask.
It's denied when you send it. It's denied.
I'm not talking about whether or not it's been denied. I'm talking about how many have been requested. I'd also like to point out that the man who came and spoke with us about his daughter's troubles, and it was very moving to hear him talk about it. And I followed up with him. I followed up with the school principal. He has not filed any sort of exemption or request to have a different situation for his daughter. So I'm just looking at whether or not we're following the processes that are currently in place. I currently have had, I've had a couple of school leaders say I'd be okay with them being optional. I've had a couple of them say, how about high schools? They go optional. I have had 27 elementary school parents reach out to me begging, from District 3, begging that we keep masks. I've had 3 reach out in District 3 saying they would like us to go mask optional. Just telling you the outreach I have received. I am sick and tired of talking about masks. I'll tell you that right now. If you take a look at the slate of legislation at the state level right now, the actual attacks on public schools right now in our state, that's where I need to be putting my focus and energy. Not on masks. I'd like to see everyone in this room who's turned out to advocate about masks show up for some other issues as well. Please, join us. Join us. If you are advocating beyond your own front door and beyond your own child, please join us as we work to hang on to the institution of public education here in Nashville. And that's all I have to say. I'll vote. I don't even freaking know how I'm going to vote right now. Y'all driving me crazy. So I'm going to listen to the rest of the talking, and then I'm going to decide.
Thank you, Mrs. Masters. Ebenezer?
All right, thank you. So I want to preface this by first mentioning that the position that Angela and I are in is a little bit different from the other board members. Most of you are representing your districts while we represent the actual student body. And our the people that we're representing, they're the ones that are going to be the most affected by this. And I think it's I've heard a lot of, positions saying that the students feel like, they can't see their teachers' faces and they can't see their friends' faces, and that's sad. Yeah, that's sad, but I also have friends that feel responsible because they have uncles and aunts that died from COVID, and they feel like they're the ones that brought into the family. I know that, for example, when I step into my house, every time I hear a cough or every time I hear a sneeze, I feel like, oh, did I bring COVID into my household? Am I the reason that my parents are going to be hurt? And I feel like stripping away the one thing that's making me feel safe at school, the mask, by making it optional, it's very ignorant. It's making me seem like I'm not important. And a lot of the idea behind, it should be optional, but it's recommended, that feels like we're just pleasing anti-maskers. We don't really care about our students. And I've talked to a lot of my friends about this, and especially on the high school level, and a majority of them feel like by making it optional, but recommending it, we're being hypocrites. We're making it seem like we're just listening to the mass media or to the people that come and yell at us during our board meetings. So to my board members, I want to say, think about the kids that feel guilty because, their family members, they think they're putting them at risk. Think about the kids that every time they hear a cough from their parents or they hear a cough from a sibling, that they feel like they're the ones that brought it to their household because they didn't wear the mask properly. We know that masks work. It's very ignorant and stupid to believe that not wearing masks or making it optional is going to appease a lot of people and it's going to keep our students safe. It's not. We have to keep the masks. And so we see a very large decrease in the numbers. And although there's a substantial decrease in the trend, and we see it in the graphs, that number is still above zero. It shouldn't be above zero. The only time we should consider removing masks from the system is when
we're
that
not
number
going
is
to
from
speak
zero.
over young people. Go right ahead, Ebenezer. I apologize.
Yeah, that's all I have
for
to
the
say.
adults in the room.
I know that I can't vote, but I urge all board members to vote against this bill. And so we actually, or policy, and so we actually see that number be flat, and we see a total decrease in the amount of kids that are getting the virus. Thank you.
Thank you, Ebenezer. Anjali?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Ebenezer said, sorry. As student board members, we don't have any voting power. And so most of us all know how Ebenezer and I stand on mask mandates, and he basically said what I needed to in terms of how we stand personally. So I took the liberty on myself to make a really informal survey last night to get student input. And so I got student input from the students that Ebenezer and I represent, actually getting quite a few numbers from different schools as well. I asked if students are comfortable if this mask mandate were to be lifted. I can say, not even doing the math, just reading the responses, that at least 95% says no, they don't feel comfortable. Most of the reasons being that, like what Ebenezer said, family members are immunocompromised and jeopardizing safety of people who may have a really bad reaction to the virus. I also asked students from outside of MNPS schools how their schools are handling COVID, most of which are taking mask optional steps. And these students are saying that I wish that I was in MNPS because of how safe that they would be. And I'm just relaying this information. I'm trying to be unbiased, and that's how I presented this information, just trying to represent my student constituents. My dad is a nurse at Vanderbilt, so he knows firsthand how impactful this pandemic has been. My best friend was in the ER because of COVID, and to see people not take it seriously whatsoever is completely undermining the lives of the people that we have lost, the lives of the people who my dad works with, who follow the rules, and there's still people not following even the basic bare minimum. And I just want to say that if this mask mandate is lifted, these statistics on mental health, on anxiety rates, suicide rates, and how our students are really doing, are they going to just be a statistic that you keep comparing COVID to, the efficacy of masks? Because I can guarantee you that once this mandate is lifted, that's just going to go out of the window. And if we're really putting students first, then put the mental health of students first. Regardless of where you stand on this mandate, that is what's important. Regardless of how this is going to go on this decision, student mental health, student well-being comes first. So if you really want to preach on that, act like it. As a student and representing my student peers, act like it.
Thank you, Anjali. Mrs. Player Peters.
I second the motion, and I did talk to students. Last week, I toured Wright Middle School, and the students were very vocal, first about school uniforms, surprise, surprise, And so I asked them, just like, how do you feel about masks? And they said they wanted to keep them instated. They felt safe. They said they'd rather have masks and be in school than worry about not having masks and worrying about closing down school. They felt that becoming a mask becomes part of the norm. They even joked that when they go to lunch, they actually start putting food in their mouth and there's food on their mask because they forget they have it. And so for them, and these are middle school kids from each grade level, from 5th, 6th, and 7th, who felt that. And so, and my constituency, I have a very ethnically diverse constituency. And as I talk to the constituents in my district, one thing I know is that they're multi-generational. They have a lot of grandparents in LA, not by economic reason, but by cultural reasons. And so, and I have a lot of grandparents who are guardians and the primary caregiver of the students. And so for them, they say they feel safe just because of how their household's made up through the blessing we have, the diverse schools of my district personally, and I know of Rachel Ann's districts also. And so for them it was important. So the constituency that I've heard from my students in my district, from the parents, is that they would like this for safety reasons. The transition, I think, is a fair compromise, that the fact that we can continue in this, make sure that we're continue this downward trend until after the spring break. I think that's a fair compromise. I think it's one of the things of making sure there's time for people to settle and make accommodations as they see fit. And I know compromise, everyone's not going to be happy with it, but it is a compromise. It is pragmatic. It's something that we can transition to, give time for the administrations in the school to do so. And so my conversation with my constituents and with the students in my district, I did have conversations with them. You know, I am not a parent. I've said that many times, but I did talk to parents. I have talked to students, and I've talked to administrators who have to implement this and give them a voice and represent their voice. And the overall response that I got is that they want to see this continue. So I understand where a lot of people in this room stand for, but I think that's a fair thing. I think a district our size, we have been very flexible, as flexible we can be. I know we compare us to other districts, but when we are 2 or 3 times bigger and the impact of COVID is different from other counties, just because of our sheer density, just because of our sheer volume. Because of that, we cannot act like other school districts. If we could, we did, but we're not other school districts. We're the 2nd largest school district in the state. Us in Shelby County, not once did we shut down schools during the pandemic, unlike Williamson County, unlike Rutherford County, unlike Wilson County. It wasn't because of students, because of staff. Students are important, but the staff is not literally there to teach them. It doesn't matter if the students wear a mask or not, because we have the adults we have to keep healthy in addition to the students. And I'm proud that Dr. Battle was able to have that happen. The plan worked because compared to our other counterparts, for the 2 largest school districts with the most density, not to shut down school not once during the height of the pandemic is something. That is not nothing. And I will stand by that till the day I'm on this board. So it's only a couple of weeks. We can do this. Our kids are resilient. I have faith in our kids to be able to come and learn. Dr. Chang has just sat here for about 30 minutes and showed the growth that we have during a pandemic, that academic progress happened in spite of masks. So this is not failing. It is working. Our kids are learning. Improvement is happening. We can be that district. We are leaders. And we have to make difficult decisions that everyone not like. But we are responsible for public health. I said it before. Once a child steps onto MNPS grounds, it is our responsibility to keep them safe. What they do once they step off is parents' responsibility. But as my charge, my fiduciary responsibility is to make sure is that the public health of our students and faculty can happen so education can happen. And so that is my charge. That is your responsibility. That's why I'm going to stand by Dr. Battle and her staff, the choices that they make, because I want growth to happen. Our sole job is to make sure kids learn, and we create an environment for children to learn. And I will stand by that until the day I'm on this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Player Peters. Mrs. Elrod.
Okay. There are a lot of comments and topics and things to respond to. So I guess first, as the most, we'll say, adamant about removing masks at this current time, I'll respond to some of those comments first. So I know that there is some belief that we have made some of the worst mistakes and that there are ongoing concerns and issues with our current mitigation strategy of masks. My assumption is that there is no scientific peer-reviewed data to be provided for this, especially because that position was not at all supported or helped when you decided to not complete the director's evaluation, or if you had that information, you would be inclined to provide that as part of your board responsibility. Additionally, we should have decisions based upon pediatric and pediatricians' responsibilities and their expert opinions. And so it should be noted that the American Academy of Pediatrics still recommends masking in schools over the age of 2. Additionally, the CDC still requires, or doesn't require, pardon me, but they still strongly recommend that masks are inside of school settings as well. And we have also had many changes from the beginning. I mean, this has been quite the journey of not only our collective data that we're following, but our assessed level of risks. But one of the things that have been consistent among those things that we have been receiving from our experts through Dr. Battle or through the COVID task force or whomever has been the per 100,000 person data. That has been a consistent number that we continue to be told to kind of follow. And as Dr. Battle mentioned, that number is trending down, which, thank God. And so my feeling is that we should wait the 2 weeks. The trends, if you follow them, not only the local trends, but the state trends and some of the national trends, have shown that we are kind of at the tail end, or we're starting to get towards the tail end of this surge. My thought is that it looks like by reviewing that data, following the trends of it, there's also some recent data that came out from the Tennessee Hospital Association that it looks like we have about 2 more weeks, and then we really should be kind of out of the clear. The 2 weeks mark is really 2.5 weeks, I know, until spring break. And so I think that is probably the wise cutoff spot for us to make such a large operational change to these students. Additionally, to Ms. Player Peters' point, and to also the point of Ms. Bush about, our students being beautiful and shiny, we have a diverse student population, much more diverse than surrounding counties. And part of that is definitely aimed within the South and Southeast Nashville districts, which Ms. Bush, myself, and Ms. Player Peters proudly represent. And those areas have disproportionately, from the beginning of the pandemic, been affected by COVID-19 in a multitude of ways. And so I understand that we do hear from people that want the masks removed for various reasons. But we also I hear from many more people that want to continue mitigation efforts. Believe me, there are people that want many more mitigation efforts than we are currently doing and are quite upset about what they consider a lack of mitigation efforts. And that's not just teachers or staff, which are often villainized in this conversation. It is from parents. Now, granted, to Ms. Player Peters' point, in our districts in Southeast Nashville, we do have the unique position a lot of times within our communities and cultures that there are multi-generations living underneath one household. And so risk is a lot more palpable to those families, and they are very, very concerned about their continued risk. So I also believe, though, because this point has not been made, and I think it's valuable, that it's important for us to give families that I know many in this room disagree with, but we need to give those families a heads up. If they are families or students that are medically fragile for whatever reason that might be, we need to provide them some heads up of this additional change to our operation and mitigation efforts. It is key for them to be able to make plans, as I personally have here many times, particularly from this one large group of Egyptian families, that very badly will need to start moving people around to mitigate that risk effort and the potential spread within their home that they are concerned about. So we need to provide them with some type of heads up that there's going to be this change that will potentially bring risk inside their home that they are highly aware of and that they have a heightened awareness of because of the effects it's had within their districts and within their communities. Additionally, some of those people will also have to take additional preparations of making sure that they purchase additional masks and all testing and all these other kind of things that will help them feel like they are protecting, of course, their students and children. And as we are unfortunately all very much aware, those things are not as easily procured as they really should be. And so I would like to give them the heads up as well. The 2 weeks point, I think, is the right place to be. We are at the right time to have a decrease. And it is important for us as a school system to not only have convictions about what we want and what we think is the right thing to protect not only our students and staff, but also our communities. But we also need to lead by curiosity, and we need to be able to pivot if needed. And so I am proud that our board is willing to do that pivot. Now, again, that will be exceptionally based upon that community spread and the expert opinion, and that has how it's always been. Excuse me, one moment. Thank you. And that's how it's always been. And so I want to make sure that we are all aware of that. But I do believe because our trends have so consistently been trending down, I think it is probably the wise and most appropriate move. The worst thing I think we really could do is remove masks and an immediate, or maybe we'll say knee-jerk response, have an issue, and then we would be able to not continue to have schools open. Frankly, we are very, very proud, and we should be proud, that we've been able to have schools open since we've been in school. And we have been able to proudly talk about that not only amongst ourselves and our student success and the consistent learning positions that we provided for our students and the environments created for our staff, but we've also been able to talk about it with the state. I know a point was brought up about the state law, about the anti-masking state law. It should be known that that law is well reported as being in contradiction to federal law. And so that's not that we're not following that law, it's that that law is not operable. Federal law trumps state law. It should also be aware that if you, that we have only, once again, about 2.5 weeks until that spring break timeline. I think that helps us get through the tail end of the surge, which is important. It helps us follow our CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics guidance, which we have always prioritized. It helps us follow the data that we have said is the data that we're following from the beginning. It helps provide a heads up to potentially medically fragile generations or constituent bases that have asked for that from us. And it also helps with any additional planning that we might have inside of our schools to make sure that this is operationally done and done well, and of course not trampling on anyone's response to it. All right, I think that's all my notes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Little.
Yeah, so wanted to highlight, just even as we look at Black History Month and we look at the history of people in front of kids just showing very disgraceful behavior. I want to say, since we cleared the room, I want to give it up to you guys who are holding your signs. You have come back in. We have had a very formal conversation. We have agreed to disagree, but as I look at the Boy Scouts of America, and some of you guys have brought your children, I really appreciate us having a civilized conversation about this. And trust me, you can see your point has been well taken. And so I just want to make sure this is something we continue, because if we want to change the discourse in our country, when we have kids and young people around, we have to be the leaders that we want them to be. And if we come out, some people said something that was kind of racist. Some of the men were being very intimidating, and I got offended, like, I'm going to take care of the women because you can't stare down people. But again, we took a break, we came back in, and so I appreciate it, and we can have more discussion after the board. But thank you guys, and thank the board. Like, this has been very passionate, and I'm just, this has been a great conversation. Agree to disagree.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Mrs. Tyler, and then Mrs. Bush.
One thing that Ms. Elrod said that I wanted to, she was talking about allowing families to get prepared and to buy more things. I don't think that we should burden families with that. It needs to be an equity issue. So Dr. Battle, do we have K95, KN95 masks available for any students or staff who asks for them?
Yes, they've been made available and will continue to be made available for students and for all staff.
So if we do vote this through, and a family decides that they want their children, and the student themselves decides that they only feel comfortable wearing the mask with the highest level of protection, it will be available for them upon request.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're also looking through that equity lens as well. And if there is a student at school who starts displaying symptoms at school, are they eligible to be tested by the nurse as long as their parents have given permission?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we also can offer testing to students to help with that. The equity lens is a really important one, and you should be able to keep yourself safe no matter how much money you have. So I want to make sure we keep that in mind as well. So as long as we continue to have the ability to take care of our students and staff, then I feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that anybody who wants to keep the masks, that they have the opportunity and the chance to not have to choose between something else. Choose between, are we going to have this food for dinner tonight, or are we going to buy a big old pack of KN95s? That shouldn't be a choice, ever. We should provide that safety. And I'm very, very pleased to hear that we already have that available. And I think, I just have to point out that we have stayed that step ahead every time. We have always had masks available. Is that correct? When I asked you about clear masking, you told me that you guys had already looked into that and that you were getting them and that they're available. Is that correct? And when we had the ability to realize that we needed to do some sort of fast testing, you guys were able to get that taken care of and bring those tests into the schools. That's correct? Mm-hmm. Yes. We are doing everything we can to keep these kids safe. We're doing everything we can to keep the staff safe. When you are in a position like this, you have to put aside your personal choices and think about, I'm responsible for making a decision that will affect 80,000 students. I'm responsible for making a decision that will affect all of our staff. And if there is ever a chance that you have to choose between two things, you have to choose the one that is the most safe. You have to. Otherwise, what are we doing for each other?
All right, Mrs. Bush.
I just want to be able to get some clarification or surrounding some of the statements that were made. You talk about we're the most dense. We're the largest school district. That does not justify keeping masks on our children. That doesn't justify that. We have Rutherford County. We have other counties that are touching us, not as large, but they have made a decision to give parents choice and options. They have. So it doesn't matter about us being, see, that was the problem before when we kept our students out of school for a year. The two largest school districts, which was Davidson and Shelby. The only two large school districts that kept their kids out for a whole year, and look what we're trying to do. We're trying to catch up. They're severely behind. Our literacy rate is at its all-time low. All-time low. Kids are not able to read and write, okay? So let's talk about the two largest school districts that kept making the mistakes. And the reason why the legislature keeps butting in local school boards is because these mistakes we keep making. And we're not giving the power to the parents. That's the problem. And as long as we continue to do that, they're going to continue to make laws in order to intervene, and then they'll make change. We just had a board retreat. Legislature has it on the books right now to take over local school boards that are not doing what they're supposed to do. Okay? Another one. Every single time there's another law the legislature looks at because we're not listening to the parents. And this is just a small group of parents here. We got thousands of parents that are in this position and how they feel. They're just not here. They can't fit in this room. But they're watching us because this was something very important tonight, was these masks, because everyone wants to move forward. We want these children to have some sense of normalcy. Yes, do we want to keep our kids safe? Absolutely. But we are 2 years in now, 2 years in. And when you have students who feel like that a mask is a part of their bodies, that's a concern. That's a major concern. We want our students to be safe. If they feel like they want to stay safe, absolutely, wear your mask. That is not what we're saying. That is not what parents are saying. If you want to wear it, absolutely. If that makes you safe, absolutely. But we have to start getting to some sense of normalcy for these kids. And it's always the children that suffer. The adults can do whatever they want to, but when you come into the schoolhouse, you got to be different. Just because my district is the most diverse district, your district, and Rachel Ann district, doesn't mean because we have different races is the reason why we're spiking. That's a little racist to me. It doesn't matter that we are the most diverse because we're the fastest growing. Southeast Davidson County is the fastest growing district in Metro, in the city. The numbers are down. This metric was the same metric that we used when we kept our kids out of school. Same one. It was just it was a thermometer or whatever you call it, okay? So it wasn't no different. The numbers are down. The numbers are down. We're 2 years in next month. If you want to have the option to wear a mask, let that happen. No one's taking that away. That's a right. You can do that. Another thing that I think that was brought up was the amount of exemptions. Y'all remember how that played out, right? So then you get the attorneys involved and say, oh yeah, they could probably get an exemption, but they got to go through all of this in order to get approved. And so you didn't have a lot of exemptions because it made it harder for the parents to get exempt. And then if they did get exempt, the students had to be isolated. They had to go into the library by themselves or sit in a cohort by themselves because they weren't able to be with their friends. So they were isolated. They were taken away from their peers because they had an exemption. So that's what happened to the exemptions. If parents had an opportunity to get the exemption and have that option of mask or not wearing a mask for their child based on the conversation they have with their doctors, based on that, not the AAP, not the CDC, because we already know CDC, they done messed up so many times. They done nationally told us, I'm so sorry, we got it wrong again. So they were honest. They made mistakes. Yeah, nationally they said it, which rightfully they should have, right? Because we're trying to follow their guidelines. We're trying to follow their recommendations. And still, we got our shots, we get our boosters, and we still get positive for Omicron or anything else that's coming, Delta, Omega, Sigma, Gamma Rho, I don't know. So I'm just saying, we got to find a way to live. because this is not going nowhere. So we have to teach our kids, wash your hands. We have to teach ourselves, wash your hands, because this right here doesn't keep you from getting it. Every single day, we get a COVID-19 update for the board. Students, long list of students, teachers that test positive. But if the masks work, we wouldn't have that, would we? I'm just trying to figure it out. We're all trying to figure it out. So we wouldn't have it, right? It makes sense. When people hand you your food during drive-through, or you're touching, you're doing all the kind of things, you pick it up. It's highly contagious. But if it makes you feel better to wear a mask, absolutely. Now, when it comes to the students, I'm not sure how they were surveyed. I'm not sure how many kids you spoke to. I'm just not sure. But what I do know is that it is healthy to give our kids options. If they're saying they want to stay in a mask, which really is a concern, should be a concern, because we want them to breathe, we want them to show their faces, we want them to think for themselves if that's what they want to do. So we talk about suicide, we talk about mental health, we talk about all these things, social emotion that these kids have gone through. We were out for a year and all that happened. We were out for a year and we saw suicide rates go up like we have never seen it go up before. We saw mental illness go up like we've never seen it before. And do you think this is not affecting our children mentally, emotionally, physically? I got a few more points. This is not a federal law. I don't want to talk about no federal nothing anymore. What we're doing is we're on a coattails, and that's what they tried to do. They tried to go on a coattail of this federal law that a judge outside of this county ordered, but didn't have nothing to do with Davidson County. Nothing. But we wanted to go on the coattails of that particular order to keep the kids in masks. I watched it all. So no, there's no federal mandate in this state. There's no state mandate for masks in this state. There is no city mandate for masks in this city. But when the children walk inside the building, they're not healthy, clean enough that they can't make a choice. But it has to be Metro school students? Always Metro schools, always. But we always want to make an excuse. We're the largest school district, so this is the reason why we have to do something different. What we need to do is focus on our education. What we need to focus on is how we're going to fix the problems that we created. That's what we need to focus on. This mask is a total distraction. Again, it should be a choice. It should be an option. And that's what we should be. It has been consistent. I'll keep repeating this. The boards across this country created this because they stepped out of their lanes. The parents are the ones that should make the decisions, not us. And if it's come to safety, that's what we're doing. We've done it for 2 years. Now we have to live, and now they have to breathe. And we have to make sure that they don't suppress their immune systems. We got to make sure that they can breathe enough where they can get out in the world and live normal, because we're all doing it. We're all doing it. We can go to all these different events unmasked. Most of us have been cited, I guess, taking pictures that we've been without our mask at events. So why is it different for our children? And that's the million-dollar question. Why do we have to do it to the children? Why? No one can ever answer that question besides we want to keep them safe. By putting a mask on their face, that's keeping them safe? No, there's other areas that we can keep our kids safe. Other ways we can teach them also. Because if you can breathe through that mask, if you can smell stuff through that mask, it's not working. It's just not. Again, this is an option. If that's what you feel that's going to make you comfortable, absolutely. I've always said that. But this is the reason why the legislature, Emily, Ms. Patton, you know, that's the reason why they keep making laws, because we're not doing our job. And we keep taking away the power from the parents. And as long as you keep doing that, this is what's going to keep happening. So I'm going to publicly say that. So I'm gonna let y'all finish. I had the floor because I wanted to make sure that I addressed all of these concerns that was brought up. Let me make sure I'm done. Lastly, parents got us back in school, not the board. So I want to make sure that I made that little note. Somebody talked about that. The parents got us back in school because they reached out to the legislatures, their constituents, their state reps, their constituents, but they reached out. I was all for getting our kids back in school, the only one. And the way we got them back in is because of parents. They did that. So as long as you keep taking away the power from the parents, this board would never make gains. I'm done.
Thank you, Mrs. Bush. Mrs. Elrod, and...
I'm just going to call because it's getting late. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Mrs. Elrod.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so there's a lot to clear up there. First, I've not heard anybody say that it's because of density, but we do have 60% of our students are considered Black or brown students, and that has historically, there's lots of data and lots of studies that show that they are disproportionately, along with their families, are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So that has been a consideration from the beginning and also a common talking point. Shelby County did choose with their board and their leadership to be out of school for a year, but us at MNPS, we did not do that. I heard that we have failing reading scores. We do have historically low reading scores. It is a situation across the state. However, we just had a whole presentation about reading scores, and so I would like for us to refer back to that. The legislature has had a bill last year about taking over the school system, which quickly failed, and again, they have it this year. It should be noted that the legislation and legislators have talked about taking over Metro Nashville schools and Shelby County schools for over a decade. So that's not a new conversation by any means. It's just maybe a renewed conversation just because it's an annual thing that keeps coming up. The thermometer was something that I really pushed for, so I'll respond to that directly. The thermometer was created in partnership with us and Metro Health because we had so many questions about what data was important and what data was informing us. And it was frankly confusing, and there was so much information on A Safer Nashville, which was the website that housed all that, still does house all of that information. And so there were a tremendous amount of requests to make that clearly understandable so that people could understand what the decision was going to be and how our decisions were going to be affected. And so the thermometer is, it's no longer being used because that data is no longer effective. We've all decided that we're willing to have a higher risk tolerance, to be honest. And so we are not using that thermometer, but it was key for people understanding our decision-making last year. We have had the exemptions, and I appreciate, Ms. Masters, that's an interesting data point of the 140 exemptions being requested. It should be noted that those requests are just showing it's an indication of the desire for those exemptions, and that we have not, of course, had exemptions unless that are medically necessary and needed, and there's a great process for that, and I know personally some students that have gone through that. But at no time have we segregated students because of them not wearing a mask or filling out that form. Additionally, it should be said that suicide rates and suicide concerns are up across the entire state. If you follow the Tennessee data on child and children's services, that information came out about a month and a half ago. Tennessee has one of the highest rates of high school suicide ideation and some other concerns. It was not worse or better in any specific larger city. It was actually worse in some of the more rural areas when you really got granular with some of the information. And I have specifically followed up on our MNPS suicide rates, as I know a lot of us were not on the board when I first started in 2018. But I remember we had a series of time where there was what felt like almost a weekly situation of a student taking their life. And so it is something that I probably, and I have friends that have done such a thing. And so it is something that I am clearly aware about. And so I have followed up on that, and we do not have an increased suicide rate or concern. But because we are wanting to stay on top of that because of the state data, we have implemented a lot of SEL initiatives to kind of combat that. And then it's important to note again that our reasoning and our mitigation efforts have changed drastically amongst the past 2 years as the data, the suggestions, and all of those things have changed as well. I think it's wise, again, that we wait the 2 weeks, and then we hopefully are able to implement as strongly encouraged, and people that need to wear their masks can wear them. Of course, keep in mind that the more people that wear them, the better that protection is, and that's important particularly for our medically fragile families and students, which I am heavily involved in those communities, and they would very much appreciate the consideration and are very, very hurt by the phrasing and the common thoughts that they are expendable. So it is important that we keep them in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. Mrs. Elrod, Mr. Little.
Just out of respect for everybody in here, and we can continue, but I would like to call the order and have the vote, and then we can continue.
Call the question.
Call the question.
Let me call the question. I need to read my book behind me.
Amen.
Good. You're good. All right. As we prepare for this motion, the last thing that I will say is that
We're supposed to immediately vote.
Okay, go ahead.
Did he get a second on the?
Oh, yeah, he had a second, third, and fourth. All right, go ahead, restate your motion.
I move that we adopt Dr. Battle's recommendation of moving to mask recommended on March 11th.
All right, we have a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. All right. All opposed? All right, motion passes. We will now move on to consent agenda.
I forgot about it.
Yep, me too. All right, we did not have any amendments to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to accept it as listed?
I make a motion to accept the current consent agenda.
All opposed, or I'm sorry, a second. We have a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of passing the consent agenda as listed, please raise your hand. All right, passes unanimously. Do we have any committee reports? We have several. We'll have committee reports at the next board meeting. All right, so we will skip from committee reports and move on to announcements. We'll begin with Ebenezer. Boy Scouts of America, it was a pleasure to have you all.
Thank you.
Sorry you had to see this.
So I want to start by my announcements by mentioning at least what I saw here. So a lot of the students that are aware of me, Angela, having this position now are aware of the board meetings that we have every 2 weeks. And a lot of them tune in on the webcam and they, read the news. And I think they're going to be disappointed with the fact that they saw a lot of mentions about having to fry bigger fish, which doesn't really make sense to me. What is bigger than student safety? So, a lot of them will be questioning this. I know they'll be questioning me. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was I think a lot of us are aware of the bomb threat that happened at MLK yesterday. And this is something that's been occurring more than it should. And I just wanted to mention to at least all high schoolers that have a social media presence to be aware of the presence that they have and to know that, if they make jokes or if they say stuff like this on social media, it's going to be taken seriously. So we should all be aware of what we say online and that it has a lasting effect. And another is next Tuesday, all juniors in the district will be having their ACT, so good luck to everybody, and make sure that, you try your best. Thank you.
Thank you, Ebenezer. Mrs. Pooper Walker.
I don't know if I can talk.
My board members have been watching me over here. For some reason, tonight is the night that this has been, it's been a hard 3 years. Let's just say that. And I think I'm so proud of these students who spoke their truth in the face of adults that were menacing to them and to us. It's something we signed up for. I mean, they did too, but but I think that tremendously proud and moved. And that's why I'm so moved, because it's hard for me to make a vote knowing that students are counting on us, and to be lectured and harassed and bullied on this board, like every board in America, it takes a toll. This is an act of service. I get $300 every 6 weeks for this job, okay? So what I'm saying to you is, we are doing the best we can with the information we have for the students that we care about and the staff that we care about. I don't have a personal agenda. My agenda is to help our district move forward. You can disagree with me, I can disagree with you, but you don't have the right to menace and threaten the students up here and my friend Adrian Battle and think that that is somehow going to persuade us to vote differently. Quite the contrary, right? So I'm emotional because it's really hard to do this job. And whether you have a different position than me, be clear, this spotlight is hot and it takes a toll. And for some reason, tonight is the night that I acknowledge that. Anyway, so I'm going to do my announcements. I want to start by taking a moment to recognize Tyloo Schuyler Quinn, who passed away from cancer. She was the founder of the Nashville Food Project in 2011, started out of a kitchen with volunteers, and she moved that to serving hundreds of millions of meals to homeless people, to people who were living in poverty. She is a model for so many of us, and I think that that's what makes Nashville so special, are people like her who dig in and help and make us a better place. And I want to just let her family know that we're thinking about them. And she was very public about her glioblastoma and her fight with that disease, and I really respect that. And I just want to recognize her tonight. Please vaccinate your children, sooner the better, right? I want to thank thanks to PAC for having their session tonight, so that was really powerful. I want to thank, I couldn't say it earlier, but I want to thank all of the staff. Our MAP scores are a testament to really hard work under very difficult conditions. And we know that that takes every single adult in every building, every parent, every student. It is the only way we get through this is together. That is the only way. And so I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Poopa Walker. Mrs. Bush?
No announcements.
I'm sorry I cursed earlier, by the way.
Ms. Posh?
It was surprising.
Metro's going to have to bleep that.
Mrs. Elrod?
There's a delay.
I must say, I was taken aback. The woman was the lady was so shocked she could not speak. Is that what's the TikTok term? Is that the right one? I'm so sorry. I'm very uncool. Can you tell? To the very well-deserved acclamation and kudos to, frankly, I'm impressed that our student board members continue to attend. It is a lot to do, and it is a huge ask. And like both of us, or like I would say most of us on the board, these are unprecedented times, and you thought you knew what you were getting into, but surprise. And so to that point, I know that we are coming up to the time where we're going to need to start recruiting for new student board members. And if they are attending, and I do hope they are, I understand that today may not be motivating to you. But if it is motivating to you, I understand that. I am one of those people where my overwhelming convictions and want to leave it better than I found it rule my life, even though it means a tremendous amount of sacrifice. So if you are interested, we are looking for, man, the emotions. We are looking for 10th graders that are interested in becoming a part of that application process, and we would be so honored. And we truly, it is one of the best things that we have done on the board. Very proud of you for it. And we would be so grateful. And please do not let today detour you. And if you have a question, please feel free to email me, and I will be sweet to you about that. Additionally, I am very proud of Overton. As always, Overton is fantastic. And I used to talk about the Overton train, choo-choo. But they were recognized several times today and tonight in our awards and recognitions, and that should not be overlooked as, again, not just within our MAP scores, which of course are not high school, but all the other things that we have been doing through our academies and just the ongoing requirements that we have had on our leadership and our staff. I really appreciate that, and then them even being here tonight and being in attendance and continuing their long school day with us is very appreciated. Thank you for bringing up about the ACT. I had that on my notes, and of course, Ebenezer was on it. Lastly, we have a number of upcoming PTA, PTO meetings in District 2. I strongly suggest that you always attend those. That's the best way to stay up to date with what's going on at your school. And of course, you're welcome to ask me about those, and I will point you in the right direction. I appreciate the PAC this afternoon in the town hall. District 2 is heavily represented by both the PAC secretary, the PAC president, and Mr. David Prophet. And so I appreciate District 2 heavy. And so I appreciate that. And I had one more thing, and I didn't write that down, and so it serves me right to not say it, and I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Player-Peters. And for those students who want to do, Auntie Frida will be here to have your back, no matter what your truth is, whether you agree with me or not, because I become very protective. So that's there. And then for my announcement, it was a pleasure to tour Wright Middle School last week with Kevin, Mr. Kevin, Miss Sashay, and Miss Rebecca. They did such a great job. And what I loved about it, well, their tour was professional, as I said they should do it. And they were much more professional than most adult staff counter who given me tours. But what I also loved about the Glencliff ambassadors trained the middle school, the Wright Middle School ambassadors, and that's also why they did a great job. So I love to see the synergy between the high school and the middle school, and they did a great job, and I love how they were very intelligent and thoughtful and courageous in speaking their views. And we had a really good discussion. And also, by the way, and I was escorted without any staff, by the way. It was just me, the 3 kids, and myself. So, yes, I know, really? So anyway, so it's really good. I had a great time. I know I'll have a closer relationship with Wright to do that. But it's really good to see our children really be involved in the civic process and be able to thoughtfully talk about their school with such energy that they were all interrupting each other. It was so cute. And that they had so much to say with pride in their school, but also advocating for their fellow students. So I can't wait to continue my tour that got postponed by the pandemic. And I just want to give a shout out to Wright Middle School.
Thank you, Mrs. Player-Peters. Mrs. Masters.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Maplewood High Air Force Junior ROTC Color Guard Detail because they performed for 10,000 spectators at the Predators game on February 15th. Wow. So that was very exciting, and they continue to just be a jewel of our MNPS family. And not to belabor the point, but I just also want to point out that there are more than 40 lobbying firms working against the interests of public education in our state. I want to point out that I have spent my week sifting through an 84-page document of all of the K through 12 related legislation that is currently pending at the state level. So when I seem frustrated over talking about masks, it is because I am attempting to use this position while I'm in it, not to be a politician, and certainly not to ruin the lives of children. Believe it or not, that's not why I ran for school board. I'm attempting to use this position to try to have some sort of impact on public education here in Nashville. So if you see and hear and feel my frustration, it is because I'm putting in the time for the actual responsibilities of being a board member. So, again, once all this masking stuff is behind us, any parent should feel free to give me a call, and I'll share this legislation with you, help you figure out who your representatives are and how you can reach out to them and be a part of the solution. If you'd like to be a part of the solution now, the Parent Advisory Council is still recruiting cluster leaders and volunteers, and they are doing really good work to collaborate with Metro Nashville Public Schools, not to always agree with the administration or even with the board, but to actually work collaboratively for the better of all students and employees, not just for the children that they tuck in at night in their houses. That's all.
Thank you. Mrs. Tyler?
First, I want to congratulate all the teachers who just earned tenure that we voted on earlier. That's extremely exciting. Big deal. So congratulations. I know that was hard-earned. I also want to commend our student board members for you guys. I know that a couple weeks ago we started saying, you found your voice. I mean, you've hit your stride now. And I want you to be proud of what you do.
Thank you, Mrs. Tyler. Anjali?
Okay, so I want to say, I just want to open with shout outs to the Hillwood ambassadors. They're three of my very good friends. Rudra, Ellie, and Meredith are some of the best student leaders I could think of to represent Hillwood, and I'm lucky enough to call them my peers and friends since middle school. As Ebenezer said, next Tuesday, March 1st, is Junior ACT Day, so juniors, good luck. Please don't forget to get some rest, eat a healthy breakfast, and don't stress out too much. It will all be fine, I promise. If you haven't registered for Nashville Youth Climate Summit, there's still time. The link for registration is in my Instagram bio, as well as the Nashville Cumberland River Compact. It's a really cool opportunity, and we would love to have you there. Congrats to all students who were named National Merit Scholarship finalists. I know a few are in our district, so congratulations. And I just want to close with saying that for students who are tuning in, if you have any issues, grievances, or needs that need to be met, please reach out to me and Ebenezer, because this is why we're on the board, to represent your voices and not just our own, and that's why we're trying to represent all views and all opinions. And this is all for you guys, and as I'm almost about to graduate, I hope I can set up just a structure for student voice to be considered and to actually be put first. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to echo everything that's been said, and congratulations, MNPS staff, leadership, students, everyone that engages with students every day. I want to continue to push the point that not only are our students doing well and doing better than the national norm, but they have actually rebounded from pre-pandemic, proving that what we're doing at MNPS works. So thank you, Dr. Battle. Thank you, thank you, thank you, educators. I know it has not been easy. I would like to remind everyone about Mrs. Masters' updates, that please be watching the legislative sessions. They are occurring January through May. You can go to capitol.tn.gov, just look at the Education Committee agendas, and please just feel free to watch along. Understand what's happening at the different levels of government that impact MNPS schools. We at this board table develop policies to support students, but we also are superseded by local and state policies. I will say that my son's teacher had, I hate to put my good Miss P out there, but she had COVID, and so I thank you, Mrs. Bush, for elevating the idea that parents can become subs. So parents, please sign up to become subs. We have hired every single sub that is in the system. I remember there was a Facebook issue a couple of years ago around parents being subs. We would love to have you. And the last thing that I'll say is that we really do appreciate community members coming out to speak to us, even when we don't agree. But yes, I will continue to ask you to show a level of decorum, especially when there are students in the room. Even without them in the room, they are watching, and the conversations we are having are on their behalf. So feel free to engage us via email, via phone, and then, of course, during public participation, which is the first meeting of each month, the second Tuesday of each month, around 5:30. My Napoleon complex will not let me close this out without saying this, though. For those of you that think you will come in here and intimidate my director, intimidate my colleagues and I, stare us down, we all have husbands and brothers and dads. I have 2 dads, so stay safe. If you're feeling froggy and you feel like you want to jump, don't do it here. Call us if you want to, email us if you prefer. But please do not bring that into this boardroom, and please don't think you'll get away with it. But be there no further business. This meeting is adjourned.
Angela.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.